I think I started full time in 2008. I started my internship at Bell Canada. And when I started that internship, it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be. And so I left. But I was relentless. I was unemployed for about a year and a half after I graduated. And the job market was hard, no different than probably what people are experiencing today. I had to figure out like a way to get through because I was still applying traditionally, but that pile was so huge. And I think what was great about Career Edge is it shrunk the pile down. It had access to a lot of great companies, one of which was TD. And so I did, in my idea of like what the ideal job was, I wanted to land in a big corporation because I felt in a big corporation I would have the flexibility to move into different parts of the company, but not necessarily leave it. And I was a marketing grad, and I was trying to get into marketing, but all the agencies closed their door at me. And I don't know why. They didn't tell me it was an executive assistant role at this agency. And again, my idea was to get in. So I didn't necessarily see myself as being an executive assistant long term. And so I went in for the interview, and I think I did like great. And the hiring manager told me I did great, but said he wasn't going to give me the job. And I was confused. I was like, well, technically, if I did a good interview and you liked what I said, then give me the job. And he's like, I couldn't guarantee that you were going to stay in the job. And he gave me, I would say, the most thoughtful piece of advice early on in my career. And he told me not to set the bar so low. And I think, when you're looking for work, you can do that. You can underestimate who you are and what you're capable of because you might hear no and get a lot of doors closed along the way. And so I think that was like a good like booster shot, like to sort of be like, okay, like I need to keep at it. And so that's kind of where I sort of landed with Career Edge. And even when that Career Edge door seemed to close, I was like, oh, I'm going to open it up again. And so I applied with the fake name at TD. And I remember going in for the interview. And at this point, I had gone for many interviews and had many doors closed in my face. And I think the thing that happened was I started to care less. This interview, I actually just wore pants and like a basic sweater. And I remember I had sort of this chain hanging out, and the person interviewing me was sort of going through sort of the conversation and sort of the aspects of the job, and I was sort of answering it technically. And then she asked, she's like, oh, where did you get this cross from? And I said, oh, the cross is something that I got for my first communion back in like 1986. And she's like, you kept it all these years? And I'm like, I don't really know how to throw out a cross. And she chuckled. And that's when I knew I got the job. And it's a funny thing to instinctually know, especially for something so trivial and like not professionally related, but it's like, it's that connection, right? And I think like the advice I would give people going into interviews sort of young in their career is if you're already getting invited into an interview, then the technical stuff is already sort of understood. You don't need to restate what they already read on paper. What they want to make sure is you're a good fit for their team, that you're someone that you can go grab coffee with, that like the chemistry on their team won't be disrupted in any significant way. And I think the thing that I wish I told my younger self was relax, be you, because that's what they're looking for. They want to see someone who's authentic. They want to see someone who's comfortable and someone who just seems like easy to get along. But I was going in sort of like a robot, like, let me answer all the technical questions properly. And that's my robot impression, by the way. And that wasn't genuine and it was stiff. And human beings, like they have this like detection system where they can tell phony. It's the reason why we know the difference between a real apple and a plastic one. We all have that hardwiring. And so when you go in for interviews and you look like a plastic apple, you know not to eat it and you know not to give them the job, right? And so I think in that interview, I actually looked like a real apple, and that's how it sort of created that connection. And 20 years later, I'm here. I think the thing that I always try to sort of get across to them is let your guard down, right? Like, I think going into a professional environment, especially as a young person, because I felt sort of this like pressure of like, I don't want you to think I'm immature. I don't want you to think I'm childish, right? people to sort of feel comfortable in the space that they're in, because you're spending 7.5 hours, 8 hours a day. And if you're constantly like code switching because you think you need to act a certain way, you're just adding a degree of difficulty on top of the fact that you have to do a job and execute and be professional and all these sort of things. To say that, like, when that discrepancy between who you are outside of the office and inside the office is so stark and so contrasting, it will be an additional weight that holds you back in terms of moving forward in your career. And so that's kind of where it takes a certain level of vulnerability, and it's hard to have when you're in like a young, sort of early stage of your career, but it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable and like trust that people will accept you as is. And so that's kind of when I'm in the position of a leadership role and I'm sort of helping someone who's younger and early on in their career. That's kind of the first thing I kind of try to get across to them is like, let your guard down. You don't need to be sort of uptight with me. I think in a business environment, you sometimes are sort of told you need to project a certain level of strength. But in my experience, it's actually the opposite. Like it's actually being honest, it's being vulnerable, it's being transparent. I mean, those can be forms of strength, but it's not the way you see it on TV or, in movies and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of where, you know, being able to bring yourself and be authentic and, ask for help, raise your hand. I think those are sort of the things that I kind of encourage people who are new in their career is like, don't try to hide it, because it's just like a kid who's learning how to walk. Like, why are you going to pretend you know how to do it when you're learning how to walk, right? It's like, ask for help, like, hold someone's hand. Like, those things are okay. Yeah, I mean, congratulations. I'm glad that the program still exists. I am a very strong advocate for the program. I think for me, it opened up a lot of doors. And again, like, I think the key thing is like, yeah, you can submit applications through like a corporate website or whatever. But I think what Career Edge did really like does really good is like they have a pipeline into these corporations, and they have these roles sort of tailored for entry level, right? So it gives people maybe a direct access to these companies in a way that like going through, and I mean, now you have AI and like it's filtering out applications and stuff like that. Like, at least you have like a closer link into the company than you would just generically applying through like a corporate website. And there was a good support structure. So I think like sometimes you'll apply for jobs and like the mandate isn't clear, the reporting lines aren't clear, and you kind of feel rudderless. But I think, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the way these programs are established, like there's a clear role, there's a clear sort of structure so that like the person's hired and they don't feel like they're lost in the system. And so I had regular touch points with my boss, but I also had a touch point where Career Edge. So like I felt supported and I was able to sort of give my feedback, my concerns, and sort of move successfully through my internship into sort of a full-time role. The only thing I would say is I would have wished I paid a little bit more than $1,200 a month, but it did lead to bigger and better things. So it was okay to maybe get paid below minimum wage, but in the long run, it all worked out.